Hello, and welcome to Revenge Diaries. If you enjoy stories where quiet dignity becomes unforgettable power, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more stories that matter. Today's story was sent in by one of our listeners, and it hit us deep. It's the story of a mother who gave everything to raise her son only to be mocked in public by the people she loved most. They thought she was just a maid. They had no idea she owned the entire store they were shopping in. But what's most powerful? She never raised her voice. She simply let the truth speak louder than their laughter ever could. This is a story about quiet strength, earned respect, and a lesson her son would never forget. Let's begin. At the grocery store, my son chuckled when his wife called me the maid like it was some kind of joke. They had no clue I actually owned everything, including the store they were shopping in. What he didn't understand was this: I wasn't the one who needed respect. He was, and he was about to learn that the hard way. It was a regular Tuesday. I'd just clocked out from a brief inventory check in the back office of the grocery store I own. Not that anyone around here knew that. I preferred it that way. People treated you differently when they thought you had money. I liked watching from the inside, disguised, unseen, but never out of place. To most of the staff, I was just Miss Mary, the elderly woman who showed up now and then, stocked shelves without complaint, and cleaned up after people without being asked. I didn't correct them, let them assume I was retired and bored. Truth is, I'd spent 3 decades building this store chain from the ground up. There were now 14 locations in the state. Quiet wealth, no attention. I walked down aisle 4, pushing my cart slowly, taking note of pricing labels and stock gaps, when I heard a familiar voice. Too familiar. Ugh, grab that, would you? Your mom's just standing there like the maid. It was Lindsay, my daughter-in-law. I paused, turning my head just enough to catch her out of the corner of my eye. She was wearing her usual Fox designer sunglasses inside, clicking her nails on her phone and smirking like the world owed her something, and standing right next to her, chuckling like it wasn't a slap to my dignity. My son, Tyler, my only child, the one I'd raised on my own after his father walked out when he was 7, the one I worked 3 jobs for so he could eat, the one I sat up nights helping with math homework, teaching him to tie a tie, kissing his scraped knees, and now, he laughed. She's always helping us out, Tyler added casually. She's good with cleaning and all that stuff. You know how she is. I blinked. They hadn't noticed me yet, not fully. I was just another background figure. Just another nobody in sensible shoes and a modest cardigan. Just the maid. The breath caught in my throat, but not from pain, from clarity. In that moment I understood. They saw me as small, not because I was, but because they had shrunk in empathy, in values, in awareness. I pushed my cart forward without saying a word. Lindsay didn't even glance up. Tyler looked my way once, briefly, but there wasn't a flicker of recognition in his eyes. I wasn't his mother. I was the help, and that was going to change, not because I needed their respect, but because he needed to remember who built the ground he walked on. Back in the manager's office, I closed the door behind me. The quiet was sharp, humming only with the buzz of fluorescent lights. I opened the drawer and pulled out the building's deed, flipping to the signature line. My name, Mary E. Hammond, owner, founder. I sat for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle into my bones. I hadn't wanted to play the I own this place card, but maybe I should have. Maybe it was time, not to boast, but to teach. Tyler had lost something far more valuable than manners, humility, and I intended to return it whether he wanted it or not. Later that afternoon, I made a quiet call. James, I said, speaking to the district manager, I want to schedule a staff training meeting for tomorrow at this location. Mandatory attendance. I'll be running it personally. James hesitated. You sure, Miss Hammond? I'm sure, I said. We'll be discussing values. Got it. The next morning, I arrived in tailored navy slacks and a crisp cream blouse. Hair tied back. No apron. No mop. No name tag. Just presence. I stood at the front of the staff lounge as employees filed in, including Tyler and Lindsay, who'd come back in for some kind of VIP loyalty account issue, or so they claimed. Lindsay clearly thought it was an exclusive customer event. She wore red lipstick and heels. Tyler's face turned pale when he saw me at the head of the room. Mom? He whispered. Lindsay narrowed her eyes. What's she doing here? I smiled. Welcome, I said calmly. Thank you all for coming. I know this was last minute, but sometimes respect can't wait. their faces shifted, some confused, some intrigued, one or two clearly nervous. I folded my hands and continued. I'm Mary Hammond, owner of this store, and every other Hammond market in the state. Gasps. A few mouths dropped. Lindsay's turned chalk white. Tyler's hand gripped the back of the chair, and I smiled again. The kind of smile that comes from years of holding back. The room was still. You could hear the clock ticking on the back wall even though no one dared look away long enough to check the time. Lindsay's lipstick looked suddenly too red, too bright. Her gaze darted toward the exit, then back to me. Tyler swallowed hard, the kind of gulp that made his Adam's apple bob like he was 13 again and caught lying. I stepped forward calmly. Let me repeat that for those who didn't quite catch it. My name is Mary Hammond, and I own this store. A few employees gasped again. Others turned their heads slowly to stare at Tyler. Someone in the back whispered, "Isn't that her son?" I smiled politely and placed a folder on the table in front of me. Inside were the original deeds, profit summaries, and a short printed copy of the store's founding story, the version I never bragged about, because it was never about me. Until now. Today's meeting is about values, I said, letting my voice be soft but strong. About how we treat the people who stock shelves, mop floors, carry groceries, and sweep up broken jars without ever asking for recognition. I turned my gaze slowly toward Lindsay. Her face twitched. Some people, I continued, think titles or money make you valuable. But I built this business one overnight shift at a time. I swept these floors barefoot during remodels. I installed these shelves with my own hands. I didn't do it to be applauded. I let the silence hang again before adding, I did it so no one ever would have to be laughed at for being mistaken as the help. Lindsay's mouth opened slightly, but she had no words. Tyler looked like he wanted to vanish into the wall. Let me tell you a story, I said, walking slowly along the front of the room. There was a boy I raised alone. I gave him everything. I had food before myself, shoes while I wore old ones, tutoring even when I was dead tired. I stayed up with him when he had nightmares, and when he got older, I emptied my savings so he could go to college without debt. I stopped directly in front of my son, and now that boy is a man who laughs when his wife calls me the maid. Tyler's mouth opened. Mom, I don't, I said gently, holding up a hand. Not yet. This isn't about defending. This is about understanding. I turned back to the room. We all forget things sometimes, but let's not forget the difference between someone who serves you and someone who raised you. The room stayed quiet, eyes wide, hearts beating a little faster. I looked toward the employees, the ones who had always seen me stocking shelves and never knew they were watching the owner clean up aisle spills. You all matter, I said. Titles or not, uniforms or not, the way we treat people when we think they're beneath us. That's the loudest truth we speak about ourselves. Then I looked back at Tyler and Lindsay, and that goes for family, too. After the meeting, a few employees came up to thank me. One young cashier teared up, whispering, I didn't know you were the owner. You've always been so kind. Thank you for showing us what real leadership looks like. I hugged her. Kindness doesn't require a nameplate. Tyler and Lindsay didn't leave right away. They lingered near the staff lockers, unsure of what to say. Finally, Tyler approached. Mom, I messed up. I nodded. Yes, you did. His voice cracked a little. I wasn't trying to hurt you. It was just a joke, a stupid one. I raised an eyebrow. A joke that made your mother feel invisible in a store she built. That's not just stupid. That's disrespectful, he sighed. I didn't know. I didn't know this was yours. And would that have changed anything? I asked. Would you have told her not to call me the maid if I wasn't your mother or your boss but just an ordinary person? He didn't answer. He couldn't, because he knew the truth. They didn't treat me poorly because they thought I was poor. They treated me poorly because they didn't think I mattered. Lindsay finally spoke. Her voice was a whisper. Mrs. Hammond, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. I was just tired. And I thought you were one of the workers here. I am one of the workers, I replied simply. She swallowed hard. But you're also the owner. She added. No, I said. I was always the owner, even when you didn't know it. What you said wasn't wrong because of who I am. It was wrong because of what it said about you. They left quietly, and I stayed behind not to gloat. To reflect, because this wasn't revenge. This was a reminder, not just to them but to myself. To never let someone else shrink you down to what they can understand. Some people will only respect you once they realize you're powerful, but true character is treating people with respect before you know their worth, because the truth is, they needed to learn that lesson, and now, they had. The next day, the store felt different. Not to the customers, they still pushed carts and browsed deals like any other Wednesday, but among the employees, there was a current in the air, a quiet respect. Some offered shy nods as I passed, others gave small smiles, like they were finally seeing me fully for the first time. But the biggest shift? It came from Tyler. He walked in that morning without Lindsay. Alone, no chuckling, no cocky grin, just quiet steps and a furrowed brow. He waited at the service counter until I walked by. "Mom," he said, voice lower than usual. "Do you have a minute?" I kept my tone even. "That depends. Are you here as my son, or my employee?" That one made him pause. "Both," he said. "If you'll let me." I looked around, then nodded toward the back office. Inside, I sat across from him, same as I'd done 100 times growing up. Bandagging scrapes, calming fears, explaining math problems. But this time, I didn't speak first. He did. "I'm sorry," he said. "I don't mean just for what happened yesterday. I mean for a lot of things." I stayed quiet, letting him carry the weight instead of rescuing him from it. I got so caught up in trying to impress Lindsay, trying to show her we're not small town or old-fashioned. I think I started to believe some of that nonsense myself. "Started?" I asked gently. He blinked, then gave a tired smile. "Fine. I did believe it. That I had to rise above where we came from. That I had to prove something. And somehow, I forgot that the only reason I have anything is because of you." He looked down. Lindsay wasn't raised the way I was. Her family talks about appearances, money, image. I guess I let that change how I saw things too. I nodded. Slowly. "It's okay to grow. It's not okay to forget where your roots are planted." He looked up, eyes glassy. "You built everything I have, Mom. I just didn't realize it until I saw everyone in that room looking at you like you were important. And I knew they were right." I leaned back. "That room didn't make me important," I said. "How I carried myself when nobody noticed, that's what did." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I want to make it right," he said. "Then start with yourself," I replied. "Not by apologizing to me, but by becoming someone who doesn't need a title to treat people better." Later that afternoon, I spotted Lindsay at the register. She wasn't shopping. She was working, wearing an apron, scanning groceries with her eyes locked on the screen. I approached quietly. "Training day?" I asked. She flinched when she looked up. "Oh, yes." I figured. It was time I actually understood where the food came from before I started making jokes about who carried it. Her voice was unsure, but her hands moved with precision. She'd clearly been practicing. I nodded. "Good. Humility starts on the ground floor." She hesitated. "Mrs. Hammond, I was raised to believe people like you worked for people like us, but I realize now, I've never actually worked a day in my life." I raised an eyebrow. "And you're planning to?" She gave a tiny laugh. "I am now." And for the first time, I saw something real in her. Maybe not transformation, but the beginning of it. Sometimes life doesn't need to scream. It just needs to whisper loud enough to shake you awake. The next week, we held an open house for new hires. A woman in her 50s came in with worn shoes and a resume folded 5 times. She looked nervous, like she didn't think she belonged. I interviewed her personally. "Why do you want to work here?" I asked. She looked down. "Honestly, because I need to feel useful again." I smiled and offered her the job on the spot, because I remembered that feeling. I remembered being her, and I would never forget how powerful it was when someone finally saw me. Later that evening, I found Tyler helping an elderly woman load groceries into her car. No phone out. No rush. Just patience. "Hi, Mom," he said after she drove off. "I'm heading to the back. Thought I'd help in receiving tonight. You're not on the schedule." He smiled. "Doesn't mean I can't still show up." That made me pause, because that was the man I raised. Not perfect, but learning. Not always respectful, but becoming. 2 weeks later, the transformation was undeniable. Tyler no longer rushed in and out of the store with his head high and his eyes down. He showed up early. He held doors open. He thanked the janitor, helped unload pallets, and once even bought lunch for the entire night shift crew. Anonymously, of course. I knew it was him. And Lindsay. She wasn't just helping behind the register anymore. She'd started shadowing the floor managers. She asked questions, listened more. She even removed the expensive fake nails that had made her tap her phone more than she'd touched anything real in years. But I wasn't impressed by temporary change. I was watching for something else, humility that lasts. One afternoon, Tyler walked up beside me in the break room while I was wiping down the counter. "Mom," he said, "do you remember what you told me when I was 10 and lost my baseball glove?" I looked at him sideways. "You mean when you accused the neighbor's kid of stealing it because you didn't want to admit you left it on the bus?" He grinned sheepishly. "Yeah, that one." I kept wiping. "I told you owning your mistake makes you stronger than pretending you didn't make one." He nodded. "I think I finally get that now." I turned to face him. "It only took 30 years. We both laughed this time, genuinely. That Friday, we held our monthly staff appreciation dinner. We hosted it in the store's back parking lot with string lights, music, and a buffet catered by the same sandwich shop I'd started. My first job in, Tyler was the one who gave the toast. "Most of you know me as Mary's son," he said, lifting his cup. "And some of you probably know me as the guy who made a complete fool of himself not too long ago." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. He continued, "I grew up believing success meant being above hard work, but I've learned the truth is the opposite. The people I used to look past, I now look up to." He glanced at me. "And the woman I laughed at? Turns out, she built the ground I've been walking on my entire life." Then he raised his cup higher. "To the people who taught us what matters and to those who gave us a second chance to notice." Everyone cheered. But me? I just smiled. Because I didn't need applause. I had witnessed growth. After the event, I stayed behind to help tear down the tables and stack chairs. I didn't have to. I could have gone home, rested my feet, and let the employees handle it. But I'd never stopped believing in earning my space even when I owned the whole building. As I lifted the last chair, Lindsay approached, holding a small bakery box. "I made something," she said, a little shy. "I know it's not snickerdoodless, but I tried." Inside was a batch of oatmeal raisin cookies, my second favorite. "They're a little burnt," she added, "but I didn't want to ask you to make them for your own appreciation night." I picked one up, took a bite, and smiled. "They're perfect." She looked down. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. You don't need to," I said. "But I hope you're not asking for approval either. Earn that for yourself." She nodded. "I'm trying." I believed her. Because some lessons stick hardest when you're the one who burned the cookies. Months passed, and Tyler kept showing up not because he was guilt-ridden anymore, but because he wanted to. He started helping expand the Hammond Market brand, this time not just as my son, but as my business partner. He listened more than he talked. He worked more than he bragged. Eventually, I gave him the reins to our newest location across town. But not because he was my son, because he finally understood the weight of respect. One Sunday morning, we stood side by side outside the original store. He asked, "Why didn't you tell us from the start that you were the owner?" I looked out at the front doors, the sign with my name on it. "Because it's not about what people know about you," I said. "It's about how they treat you when they think you're no one." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "You taught me something," he said. "What's that?" "That you don't teach respect by demanding it." I smiled. "No, you teach it by embodying it." He laughed once. "You know, that Maid joke might have been the best mistake I ever made." I didn't laugh. Instead, I gave him a long look. "Let's not call it a joke," I said. "Right." He nodded. "Let's call it a lesson." And that felt true. Because I hadn't needed their respect, but they had needed my example. And they finally saw it not in a lecture, but in the silence of someone who didn't need to prove anything to be everything.